Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining our webinar today on Dads Need Leave Too. This is a really important webinar. It's one where we're going to hear from real people who experienced this. My name is Tara. I'm the National Senior Marketing Communications Manager with Voices for Healthy Kids, which is an initiative of the American Heart Association. Voices for Healthy Kids powers the National Collaborative for Infants and Toddlers, and a big part of NCIT's work includes advancing policies like paid family and medical leave. And we know, all of us here know, that the earliest years of life are critical for healthy development, and access to paid leave really does help families bond. It supports parental well-being, and it sets a strong foundation for long-term health and stability. Importantly, that includes dads. Dads need leave too. So before we get started, and we want to hear from you, for those who just hopped on, please drop your name, your organization, and where you're calling from. That we like to kind of see where everybody is. But then also put one word in the chat that comes to mind when you think of positive father figures. This can be your own dad, your granddad, maybe a brother who you have, a cousin, or an adopted dad. I know I have an adopted dad in my life who I really appreciate. And so what's that one word that really comes to mind on the importance that they've played in your life? If it's not one word, if it's a phrase, feel free to add that to the chat too. So while you're doing that, a couple of housekeeping items that I just want to make everyone aware of. First of all, this session is being recorded, and we're going to upload that to YouTube when it's over. It's going to be searchable. So if you have concerns about that, just know it will be online, it will be available publicly, and it will be searchable. The benefit of this, you're able to access it at a later time. We're also going to share the slide deck with you. As we're talking, as our panelists are sharing their insights, please feel free to drop any questions you have when you have them in the chat. Last thing we want is for you to hold it to the end and then you forget what it was you wanted to ask. So ask as you're going along and we'll address those at the very end. Now, if you run into any technical issues, you can use the chat to message Andrea Guarnero. She is our chat guru. She will help you walk through any issues that you might be having. And then just a reminder, keep your microphone muted during the presentation. At the very end, at the Q&A, if you'd like to have more of a dialogue when you ask your question, that's a great time to come off of mute. Now, at the very end, we will have a short poll. We would love for you to please fill out that survey. Filling it out really helps us report back to our funders about our offerings. But more importantly than that, it helps us understand your experience so we can make sure we continue to bring high quality information sessions and trainings your way, and we know where to improve. And then lastly, I want to lift up one opportunity for action. Bookmark it, copy, paste it, click it even now as we're going through this discussion. There's a growing national effort called Dads for Maternal Health. I think we're going to put that link in the chat for you. And this organization, this initiative, is bringing together fathers, families, and advocates around one simple but very powerful idea, that maternal health is family health. We know this, we've seen it. We've seen family and community health improve in nations, and especially in developing nations, where moms are invested in. And there's no reason we shouldn't be doing that here in the United States. And so we recognize that dads have this critical role to play in improving outcomes for moms and babies. So give them a click, give them some love, sign up for their newsletter. Now, we'll be sure to share the link in the chat, but then again at the end of the session and in the follow-up materials. So if this conversation resonates with you, it's a really great step you can take to stay engaged and lend a voice to their movement. And so with that, I want to thank you again for joining. We're excited to hear what you have to say about this, and we're excited to hear from our panelists. So I'm going to pass it to our moderator, Josh McCabe, with the I'm going to say it wrong, Niscan. Josh, you tell us where you're from.
The Niskanen Center.
The Niskanen Center. I apologize. Thank you all.
Thanks, Tara, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us here today. We're here to talk about an important and evolving topic, parental leave. We talk a lot about moms and paid leave, but it's just important for new dads as well. And as we begin, I want to frame today's conversation a bit differently. We often think of it as a workplace benefit, but it's a lot more than that. We know from sort of the literature on this, it enables men to strike a better balance between work and family life, something where we're all trying to balance. We know they become better dads and husbands. We know dads use paternity leave, that it's positively associated with better father-child relationships increase relationship satisfaction, relationship stability, and decrease parental conflict and marriage dissolution, right? And we know that dads who take leave are exercising more, reporting higher life satisfaction. We've all been there dealing with dad bod, dealing with the stressors from all directions. So paternity leave is a major important part of that. I never got it. I remember that stress. My dad never got it. So I think it's really important that I hope my kids and their spouses will have access to it one day. Paternity leave is part of our broader, what we call a continuum of care. This is sort of a support system that helps families navigate one of life's most critical transitions, right? Welcoming a bundle of joy into the world is one of the best times in your life, but it can also be very stressful. We all need a little bit of support to do it. So that continuum includes prenatal care, birth and mom's recovery, early bonding and caregiving, as well as your own emotional and mental well-being in that of mom. And we can't forget the transition back to work. So it's a special time, but we all have an eye to getting back to our full-time job. So when dads have access to leave, they can actively participate in that continuum, supporting not only their child, but also mom and overall family health. So today we'll explore what paternity leave is, why it matters, and how it supports families, workplaces, and long-term outcomes. First, we'll hear from Sean Dreer from the American Heart Association as he discusses navigating paternity leave. Sean?
Thank you so much, Josh. And I'm really excited to be able to spend some time with you all today and tell you about my family's experience with paternity leave. So my wife, Kelly, and I have two kids. Our daughter, Sienna, is 8. Our son, Hudson, is 4. You see them there on our screen. And we had two vastly different experiences when our kids were born. So go back 8 years when Sienna was born. We lived in a different location. It was about an hour away from either of our family's closest family members. I had an hour commute each way to work. So we were kind of isolated from the key components of our lives. And I didn't have any paternity leave at the time. I only had 2 weeks of PTO that I could take for my daughter's birth. Sienna was joining us early. So we went in at 37 weeks for an induction, and that process took some time. It ended up being a 3-day ordeal, and we had another 2 days before we could even leave the hospital. So I went through 1 week of PTO without ever being home with my new family, trying to figure out and navigate life. As very challenging as you can imagine. And we had that 1 week to try to get everyone up to speed. And there were some difficulties beyond just the normal getting to know you period of our new family. My wife had some mobility complications. She had a really hard time walking and carrying our daughter, even from one room to the next, let alone up and down a flight of stairs. Our daughter had colic, so nobody was sleeping. And Kelly was working for a nonprofit at an hourly wage at the time. She did not have any leave available, so that source of income was non-existent. And I really needed to get back to work once my PTO was expired to make sure that we could afford our mortgage and bills and everything else. So I had to go back to work after only having 5 days really to bond with my family and try to get us through a really difficult period. So, eventually after about 6 or 8 months or so, some opportunities opened up. I was able to take on a new role with the American Heart Association, which afforded me the opportunity to work from home. That allowed us to sell our house. We moved closer to my wife's family so we could have a greater support system. And also during that time period before our son was born, the organization instituted a paternity leave policy. So we have paid family leave 4 weeks for everyone, new parents, adopted families included. So it was really a complete night and day difference whenever Hudson joined our family. I was able to take some PTO in addition to those 4 weeks at 100% pay. So I had about 5 weeks really to settle into our new family dynamic. Again, my wife had some complications after the birth of our son, so she had to go back into the hospital for a time being. Totally fine. Everything's good now. But just knowing that I didn't have to rush back to work, I could take care of my wife and my son and our daughter and everything else that goes along with those first few hectic weeks at home. And it was just a completely night and day experience going through the birth of each of our children and our expansion of our family. So again, I know how fortunate I was to one be in a position where I had paid time off in the first place, but then also to be able to get that paternity leave and have that time off. I can only imagine how much more stressful it is for new fathers who don't have those opportunities available to them, or have jobs where they don't even have the paid time off in the first place and they have to rush back immediately. So that's I can just see firsthand how important it is to have this family leave and the benefits that it provides to the everyone in the family, not just the father. But it really is something that I feel strongly about, and I'm thrilled to learn more about everything that's going on around the country and how we can all come together to make this a reality for everyone. So thanks so much, and I'm happy to take any questions or keep an eye on the chat as we're continuing the conversation.
Great, thanks, Sean. Thank you for sharing that story. It's something, a lot of us have been through. We don't often talk about it, so having you here to talk about it seems very, very mundane, very run of the mill, but it's so, so important. Uh, if there's no questions, we can turn now and hear from Vicky Chabo of New America and Molly Weston Williamson of Paid Leave for All. So they're going to talk a little bit about what is paternity leave when we're talking about this.
Hi, this is Vicky from New America. I don't know if you can see me. I don't think am I spotlighted? There we go. Hello. This is a photo of my daughter and her father in a kindergarten classroom. And their relationship really got off to a great start, in part because of the parental leave that both he and I were able to take when she was born. So often when people say the term paid family leave, they think about moms and babies, but as we've heard now, parental leave for fathers, for all parents, is really, really critical to the entire family unit, to the child and the child's development, to the person who's given birth, typically the mother, for her prenatal and postnatal care, and also for the father themselves. There's actually this great new book that is out called Dad Brain, that talks about the physiological changes that happen in men when children are born and they're able to provide care. So I want to sort of leave you with three things here. One is that paid family leave and paid parental leave in particular is for everyone. Two is that policy and culture really reinforce one another. And so if we can create a culture around leave taking, it can help to shift policy. And when we have policies in place, it can shift culture. And Molly's going to talk more about some data to back that up. And that policy really matters in outcomes. So a few things to know. First, paternity leave in the US is extremely rare still, unfortunately, and meaningful parental leave is rare. Just 27% of workers have paid family leave through their jobs, including men who have leave to use to care for a child. Just 13% of private sector workers are employed at work sites where all men have access to paternity leave. So sometimes slightly more might have access, but if you're looking at particular sectors of workers or people in particular types of jobs or particular industries, but just 13% of workers overall in the US work at a work site where all men have access to paternity leave. So men might use other types of leave when a child arrives, whether that's PTO or sick leave, or unspecified types of vacation leave. But overall, the use of leave is not as common as it should be. I guess the good news is that based on a survey of employed men with children under 6, that some of my colleagues just did at New America, 81% of employed men with children took some type of leave in sort of the most recent data. But only 2/3 of men with low incomes took leave. And when we look at the duration of leave, we're thinking about short leaves. Only half of men who took leave with kids under 6 took a leave that was more than 2 weeks. So as you're thinking about that really early postpartum period, mom still might be in the hospital. The baby might still be in the hospital. My own child was in the hospital for a week with an infection. And then those early new days at home that are just such a blur as you're learning how to feed your child and diaper your child and comfort your child with crying and other just like soothing that needs to happen. And it's just rare. And so most men want to have taken more time than they were able to take, and they feel held back. And so, why are they held back? We can think about the policy barriers that I just talked about, the financial barriers, which is that even when people are able to take leave, they might not have all of their wages replaced. And so, one of the innovations in paid family and medical leave programs is higher share of wages getting replaced to make it more possible for men to take leave. A fear of consequences at the workplace, even if their leave is job protected through a law like the Family and Medical Leave Act, for example, which provides unpaid job protected leave to about 60% of American workers, people might still feel worried, or they might not be covered by the FMLA or a state law. They might feel stigma from family members who are telling them they should get back to work, and they may have internalized what we think of as provider pressure, the idea that men need to be the providers for their families and get back to work and not be the people who are providing care, even though we know from surveys also that men really want to be able to provide hands-on care. So why does this matter? There's sort of five reasons why paternity leave, why paid family leave matters for dads and men. One, there's an effect on their partner's mental health and well-being, both with the ability of men to be able to go to prenatal appointments. So that's kind of a caregiving leave or using some family leave time to care for your partner. And then postpartum in terms of breastfeeding, maternal health and well-being, mental health. Two, engagement in care and development of children. Men who are able to provide care are more connected to their children, more in tune with their children. Children have better health outcomes. And men who take at least 2 weeks of parental leave are more likely to be engaged in their child's care a year down the road. So that leads to the third reason, which is more equal parenting and household responsibilities, both around caring for the child and chores around the household. When you're there actually doing the hands-on work of parenting and household management, you see the labor more. And it transitions from being invisible labor that more often in households women are carrying to something that's a more explicitly shared between two people. Fourth thing is women's labor force participation. When men are able to take leave, women are able to get back to work, are able to earn higher wages over time. And although the United States is in no way or form Sweden, there's some interesting data from Sweden, which says that for each month of paternity leave that a man takes, a woman's income goes up by 7%, or his partner's income goes up by 7%, which makes a difference for her economic well-being and the family's economic well-being and for her retirement down the road. And then fifth, as I mentioned, this is good for dads too. It makes them feel more connected. It triggers the hormones that are natural to all people. It makes them better at caring. It makes them more in tune. It can make them happier. So again, culture shifts policy, policy shifts culture. In the US, of course, we don't have a national parental leave program or a national paid family and medical leave program that's broader, but we now have 15 states plus the District of Columbia that do, including the District of Columbia that do. And Molly is going to talk about the difference that those policies have made in men's leave taking. So I'll pass it to my esteemed colleague, Molly.
Hey there, thank you so much. So I get to start with, I always like an opportunity to show off pictures of my boys because one of the reasons that I do this work is so that when they're grown, they'll have the leave they need for wherever their lives take them, including if they choose to start a family, I want them to have the leave they need to bond. But almost as cute as my kids is data. So we're going to talk a little bit about numbers. These are previews from a new report that just came out from Paid Leave for All last week. So as Vicky teed up, we don't have a national paid leave program yet, but what we do have is state paid leave programs that have been passed in 14 states and DC. And what those give us is some real world data about when given the opportunity, how American dads react. And I think that helps us understand where we are now and where we want to be. So one of the things that we did in the report, which Danielle helpfully threw in the chat, is we looked at among the programs that have already been in place for at least a year, what percentage of claims to bond with a new child were coming from men. And what we found is among those 10 programs, men were taking or applying for at least a third of bonding leaves in every single program. Men were taking or applying for 40% or more of bonding leaves in 8 out of 10. And in the most recent year of data, there are 3 states where men are taking or applying for as many or more bonding leaves than women are. And I think what that really drives home for us is we know that when there's not a program available, when there's not a guarantee, where that access to the paid leave you need and the right kind of paid leave is not there, dads want to take leave. They say that in survey after survey, but often just are not able to do so. But when we make the public policy investment in programs like state paid leave, men show up and take the leave, and they take it in increasing numbers. They take it in numbers that are looking more and more like the way that moms take leave. And I think that really shows us the need to sort of double and triple down. Because what we're seeing here is right now, dads across the country, families across the country, kids across the country are benefiting from access to paid leave to bond, to care, to help a partner to heal, and to really get all of those research-based benefits that Vicky was just highlighting. The other thing that I think these numbers really help us to understand, and you can get a lot more context on them in the report, is how things have changed, particularly in the last 15 to 20 years. So when the first state paid family leave program launched, it was California and launched in 2004. In the first full calendar year California's program was in place, only 18%, less than 20% of bonding leave applications were from men. This year, this is fiscal year 24-25, for the first time, the number of bonding leave applications in California from men match and actually very slightly exceeded. There are about 200 more bonding leave claims from men than women. That's a gigantic change in 20-ish years. We've seen similar trends in New Jersey, which was the second program to launch. When New Jersey's program, its first full calendar year, was in 2010, only 11% of bonding leave claims were from men in that first year. But instead, what we've seen and the way that we've gotten up to these much better numbers is the number of bonding leave claims for men has just exploded. In California, the number of bonding leave claims from women over that 20-ish year period has increased about 26%. That's a meaningful growth, but it's pretty modest. The number of bonding leave claims from men in California has increased 470% over that 20-ish year period. The number of bonding leave claims from New Jersey, where we've still got some work to do to get back up to equal, has increased 559%. That's a gigantic change over that period of time. And I think while we're still working on getting more of the formal research we need to understand how that change has happened, I think exactly as Vicky alluded to, what we're likely seeing is a combination of better understanding and awareness. The programs have gotten better, they've gotten stronger, they've gotten more accessible. And I think the third factor we shouldn't discount is just we've seen a real culture shift. We've seen a real culture shift in understanding of the need for and the impact of leave for dads. And we've seen the response, particularly when the public policy tools are there to support it, of dads who are stepping up and saying, yes, we want this, yes, we're pursuing this, and who are getting to reap the benefits and really bring them home to their family. There's a lot more data on this in the report, including I'm happy to talk when we get to Q&A about some of what we know about the differences among states, but I also know we have a lot more great books to highlight, so I'm going to turn it back over now.
Yeah, I think we got a couple of questions. So from Jewel, she wants to know if there's any data on the impact of paternity leave on maternal mortality, which is an issue a lot of folks here care about.
I don't know off the top of my head about data specifically on maternal mortality. There is some data on women's health that suggests that mom's health benefits. The other thing we know more broadly is that access to paid parental leave in general has huge impacts on infant mortality. I think the thing that we can never say enough is that paid leave saves babies' lives. And there's basically nothing we can do that's more important than that. And so we've seen that in state after state. We see that it reduces child abuse. We see that it reduces hospitalization. It reduces all kinds of respiratory infections. So I think we've seen some of the maternal health impacts and really big infant health and infant mortality impacts.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. I think it would be really interesting to to be able to study effects on maternal mortality, I would imagine it might be quite difficult as well, but over for sure, women's health and infant health.
Great. And apparently we have some other data nerds here. So Devin wants to know what factors there might be explaining the difference between some of these states, like DC versus Colorado. You had mentioned policy, just over time, culture. What's really jumped out to you?
So I think the first answer to this question is I'm not an empirical researcher. I'm a lawyer who sometimes plays a researcher on Zoom. And we need fuller research to really better understand the differences among programs. I think we could come to some hypotheses about the shifts. I think a lot of it is likely about awareness. I think some of it is probably about access and protections, things like is everybody's job protected? When they're able to take the leave, some of it might be about exactly how much money we're replacing. There's a bunch of different axes of variation among programs. Um, so I think we need more research to better understand what's driving these differences. But to my mind, I think the big thing to look at here is one, the overall trend is moving towards parity. And number two, one of the things we highlight, and that's why we have these 2 years in the report, is that when we compared year over year among the established programs, 9 out of 10, a higher percentage of men were taking or applying for bonding leave in the second year. And the one state that didn't get better is Connecticut, which just stayed the same at 44%, which was already a pretty strong place to be.
Yeah, I think the other thing that makes a big difference is how the programs are doing outreach to different audiences, what they're using in their communications materials, whether they have navigators, whether they're whether they have pictures of dads with kids on their websites. And Colorado has done a really fantastic job in general on outreach, as have states like Oregon and Connecticut. And the others with some of Washington with some of the higher rates. So that makes a big difference as well. Because we have a culture where people don't think about leave or think that they have to go it alone, a big part of socializing these programs is doing the outreach, the education, the communications that reaches new parents of all genders.
Great. Gene had a question about some of the trends that I think Tyler answered pretty well. But they also had a follow-up question asking for more about how men taking leave affects women taking leave, the amount of time, career outcomes, health outcomes for all family members. So we had mentioned some on infants. What others do you guys want to highlight?
One of the pieces that I think is useful to highlight, and I think we have a lot of great research that highlighted some of this research is highlighted in the report that we're pulling from here, is there's good international research showing that dad's access to paternity leave reduces divorce rates. And that goes with a broader body of research, which shows that when dads have access to parental leave, it's better for relationship stability. It's better for all of the equity in caregiving. It's better for dads being able to learn how to be dads, in the same way that having access to leave is good for moms to learn how to be moms. So I think what we really see is we have a set of health research, we have a set of economic research, but I think the broader body of research of just it's good for kids, it's good for families, it's good for dads, it's good for moms. It's good for everybody to have the tools and supports they need. And when people do have that access, we see that play out in a whole bunch of different ways that are beneficial to families, to communities, to kids.
Excellent. I'll say, and I'm glad someone mentioned this book, Dad Brain. I picked it up. It arrived. I devoured it over the weekend, and has some really good stuff on some of what Molly had just mentioned and other folks had mentioned here. Um, we have lots of questions. They're getting into specifics, so I'm going to save some of that until the end. So I want to thank Molly and Vicky for the presentation. Um, and excuse me. And our last presenter is going to be Kenneth Wisington, who will share a personal story on navigating paternity leave and the stress of being away from his workplace. We often talk about, oh, I'm sorry, wrong person. We're gonna go to Sean. I'm mixed up here. There's too many Seans. Sean Fediplace who's going to give us some reflections on being a new dad in business.
Oh, my name's Sean Fedplace, see him. I live here in the great state of Wisconsin. I'm the National Campaigns Director for Main Street Alliance. We represent 30,000 small business owners across the country. And I'll just note that Molly Williamson's on our board and appreciate her very much for the work she does with us and everyone else involved. And so first off, I'm a dad. I have a son named Charles. He goes by Charlie. I tried to use the Chuck, but my wife, I think, will divorce me if I keep trying to make that a thing. But when he was born, I was working for an employer that provide paid leave. It was 3 months for the primary caregiver and 1 month for the other parent. So I was able to take off a full month paid at that time to help take care of my son. My wife had a cesarean, which was fairly typical, but it's a pretty major surgery, and so it took her some time to physically recover. And I just think to myself, I mean, I got involved with Main Street Alliance about 6 years ago. Paid leave's been a big issue that we've worked on over a number of years, which I'll speak about in a second. But my personal experience with that just made me realize, A, how lucky I was, but also B, how it shouldn't be luck. You shouldn't have to win the employer lottery to be treated like a human being. This should be a benefit that everyone has access to. And it is frankly a moral obscenity that we don't. And so, in this work, our organization really works with small business owners. Our membership is 70% women, 50% sole proprietors, and these are people who need this benefit just as much as anyone, including the dads who are part of the organization. So first off, sometimes you'll hear, from folks who are opposed to paid leave that they support it, but that the costs are just too high, that's too disruptive. This is a real concern, and we should take it seriously, and we should respond to it and not just dismiss it. But it's also important to understand the cost of doing nothing is worse. And it's also not a question of whether or not leave happens, it's whether or not it's paid leave. People get sick, they have a kid, these things happen. And it's a question of whether or not they have that time off where they're able to absorb the economic shock of that event, as opposed to simply leaving the job and leaving the workforce. So first off, paid leave is really important for retention and cost avoidance. Replacing an employee is very expensive. It costs money to train somebody. A few months' salary is up to 1.5 to 2 times salary once you count recruiting, hiring, ramp up time, et cetera. For a small business, they've invested heavily in these folks, and it is really difficult to replace them. Paid leave keeps good people. Often you'll see proposals to require paid leave for employers above 50. That's really misguided, because what it does is then the larger employers are the ones that have good benefits and the smaller ones don't. It puts them at a structural disadvantage. It's actually worse than the status quo to do that. And so it is really, really important to make sure that these programs are structured as a social insurance to be able to make sure that there's a level playing field for small businesses. Further, leave isn't a cost on top of the business, it's cost avoidance. It's protecting the investment that people have already made in their staff and to retain them so that they're not having to replace them. Engagement and productivity. You've got workers who are supported are less stressed out, they're less sleep deprived, and they come back more focused, ready to do the work. The alternative is having folks who are really being very stressed out. Stressed out employees don't make good employees. And so it really helps with productivity, helps to avoid absenteeism, and it's helping to avoid other costs by having this in place. Furthermore, in terms of gender equity and leadership, this is really important from an equity standpoint and from both direction standpoints. My wife and I, we are proud co-parents. I am very active in my son's life, and part of that's I have a job where I work from home. I have more flexibility than many people do, and I realize that's a very privileged position to be in. But I also understand that having these policies in place, it makes it easier for productive and effective co-parenting to be taking place and to make sure it's being done in an equitable way. It also normalizes caregiving, and it helps keep women in the workforce and builds a deeper leadership pipeline for them. So this is a men's issue and a woman's issue at the same time. Often this issue gets very gendered, and it really shouldn't. So to Josh, Vicky, and Molly, what they said in their remarks is those first few weeks are really important to avoid postpartum depression, to make sure folks recover, and to make sure we follow through on care. And in the great state of Wisconsin, where I live, there is a zip code in the north side of Milwaukee where infant mortality is worse than Soweto under apartheid. This is a major issue, infant mortality is all throughout the country. And that is both a health issue for the baby, but it's also a health issue for the mom. And it is something that could partially be avoided by having more robust paid leave policies in addition to better access to healthcare. Healthier families, help to lower long-term costs because you prevent a lot of health issues early in life. And, frankly, my time home with Charles was care. That was the most important job that I had at that point. It's still the most important job I have is being a dad. But we often have these pressures to return to the workforce right away for no really good reason other than this, I think, fairly gendered and misogynistic views about the role of women and men. And having equitable leave policies will help to rectify that as well. Last thing I'll say is, and just to summarize, as far as why this is important for small business. Small business employers compete against big employers, level the playing field so they can attract and keep staff. The costs are low for paid leave. It's less than 1% almost always for the payroll tax. And that is, in terms of the benefit received, very worth it. A five-person business can offer the same leave without having the full cost alone. Often there are policies in place to make it easier for smaller businesses to do leave, whether that's the amount of the pay and payroll tax, but often there's grants in some states, Minnesota being one of them. We help pass paid leave in Minnesota. We're currently helping with implementation. There's ways to make it easier for them as well. And lastly, small business owners support paid leave. If you look at polling, whether it's small business owners or others, they know that this is an important benefit. They know it's incredibly important, and they just want some help to be able to provide those benefits to their staff and to their families and to the people they care about. So that said, thanks very much for having me, and happy to take any questions after we're done.
Thanks, Sean. And thank you for highlighting that. I know we offer parental leave at Niskanen, and it's so much easier to say, okay, here's the plan. We'll see you in a few weeks, versus what you mentioned where folks end up having to leave. You have to find new staff, you have to train them, and that is just so much harder than just having this little contract that says, we know what you're doing, we support it, and we'll see you when you're ready, and a little bit less tired. So. I think we had one question from Devin. I don't know if you want to say a little bit more about, Sean, what it means when dads are taking it alongside new moms, right? When you're hiring, you had mentioned some of those gendered aspects. Do you want to say a little bit more on that and sort of the cultural changes that we often see go along with it?
Yeah. So I would say, first off, it is really important to make sure. I think having two parents in the home in those early days, just like I can tell you, to be able to get at least a little bit of rest. I think it's incredibly important, and you can avoid some of the postpartum issues that happen with having that support network. I think that often, sometimes you have other extended family, but that's not always the case. I know from my wife and I, we lived in a place where we didn't have any family because we'd all moved away. So in addition to that, I think that there's an expectation. So I'll just say from personal experience, the organization I work at is small but mighty. We have a handful of staff, and most of us are actually dads. Like, most of us are folks who have kids, and they understand the good, the challenges, the things that need to happen, and also the realities of being a parent as well. Now, you shouldn't have to be at a place where people have that personal lived experience, but I do think it helps. And I think that reinforcing that. And I think it's also incumbent on, frankly, men and dads themselves to demand from their employer and have an expectation that this is the case. I know this is going to sound like a minor squabble, but I think it is indicative of this. When I was a new dad, I was shocked at the amount of restrooms that where only the women's restroom had changing tables and the men's didn't. And that speaks to a broader issue within our culture and our society that we have less expectations of men than women when it comes to caregiving. And I think that, and so whether you're a male small business owner or if you are somebody who works in these places, I think having an expectation that men are um, as important in the caregiving process, I think is they're not the ones giving birth, of course. I realize that's a loaded thing, but like I think it's incumbent both on from top down and from the bottom up to have a culture and expectation where this is the norm and to demand it as well. So I don't know if that answered the question, but that's just what I have to say about that.
Awesome. Thank you, Sean. That was super helpful. Our last presenter is Kenneth Wissington, who will share a personal story on navigating paternity leave and the stress of being away from his workplace. Kenneth.
Thank you so much. As you see in the picture, myself, Kenneth, my wife, Jordan, and our son, KJ, or Kenneth Jr. A little bit about me. I'm in corporate finance. I'm also a local politician, councilman for the city of Gary. So you can imagine I'm a pretty busy individual on a day-to-day basis. That being stated, also the time in which, excuse me, another call coming in. At the time in which my son was born, I was 30 years old. A lot older than what my parents were when they had me. And for me, being a financial individual, looking at the economy, you hear oftentimes, millennials are going through things such as home ownership or dealing with debt. And I found myself being very blessed, owning two properties. I work in a very competitive environment that pays exceptionally well. And you know that at any given time, there are thousands of people who will be dying to have your career. So it's tough. And I work at an institution, very great institution, that offered 12 weeks off. And I want to say about 75% of pay. But being financially savvy, it wasn't necessarily the pay that was a concern of mine. It was, what if I do lose my job and I can't take care of my wife? And so you're sitting there, and I remember my team the day I was going to take paternity leave, celebrating me. They called my wife to get on a Teams meeting. This to surprise me. And I'm in a labor room that night as everyone talked and said, hey, Ken, enjoy your time off. And I'm getting 5, 6 requests while my wife is giving birth before she goes into a C-section. And it's just that constant pressure. Even such for me, the first week that I was supposed to take off, I actually took PTO. I took PTO the first week, starting the day that my wife went to labor, as we had it scheduled. And then I want to say I had a week of work. So while our son was 1 week old at home, I remember holding him in my arms, going to Teams meetings, organizing calls, going over numbers, crunching my Excel sheets per usual, still going to council meetings. I remember just being exceptionally active. And it's just that fear of, what if I lose my career and I can't take care of my wife? I remember at that same time, her company didn't have maternity leave policy, and she's an attorney. So our incomes support a lifestyle that's very comfortable for us. And at that time, she wasn't working. And so I remember she had to fight just to get a policy for her. So the whole time I'm thinking, well, I have to work. I can't lose my job. And just to even be, I'm the youngest person at that level of leadership in my company. And it's that pressure of you're lucky just to be here. And you're seeing your friends going through the day-to-day life of, trying to pay rent or take care of student loans. And you're just like, I don't want to fall into a place in which I worked so hard to get to support my wife. And so even for me, at the birth of my son, I was more focused on my wife, seeing her with the tube in her mouth and this and that, to where I didn't really feel connected to my son to about 6 months later. Because I was just so enthralled and just trying to be there for my wife as much as possible, make sure that she was okay, the family was okay, the bills were paid, the cars are paid, insurance, you name it. It was just really making sure everything was taken care of and you're sitting there and you're drained. You don't have the energy. You're mentally fatigued. You feel present yet so absent at the same time. And it's just this emptiness of, who is this kid in my arms now? Is my wife okay? She wasn't able to walk as well and try to get up the steps. So you're trying to help her bathe. You're trying to help him. You're not sleeping. It's this cycle that was this never ending of this worry and doubt. And then fortunately, I was able to finally go through our process, which we offered 12 weeks, and through Lincoln Financial. And about 2 weeks after that, I did take paternity leave, but I did not take the full thing. I took 30 days. Reason being, I was in Washington News, but at the same time, I'm on the merger and acquisition team. Our bank bought two banks in that time period. And as you're trying to make sure that everything is okay, you don't want to be replaced at any given stake. I can tell you when we post a job listing, we're going to get 50 hits within a week for a job. And these are like MIT grads. So you're like, oh my goodness, you know, somebody's going to take my job real quick with more experience. So it's just that pressure. But one thing that really helped keep me grounded was during that 30 days I actually took off. It was the softness of my son. It was seeing my wife recover. And it really put things in perspective for me. So going back into the workforce and the workplace, my mindset was really, how do I cultivate myself and position myself in such a way to where a situation like this cannot happen? And it even inspired me to go to law school, just so I can have a career that will allow me to be more entrepreneurial and expand my scope so I never have to worry about being replaced. It's really is working as hard as I need to make sure my family's okay so that the next go around, I'm not dealing with this. I can just really be fully submerged into my family. Now I'm grateful because now my son and I, we are inseparable. Like now that he's like a year and a half, this dude's rough and I'm a woodsman. I don't know what it doesn't look like, but I'm an outdoorsman, Eagle Scout. So now my son and I, like, that's my best friend. And I'm so grateful that I took that time to just get that month. And now when it comes to work, I take every chance to get PTO I can. I let my colleagues know, hey, we'll figure this out. You guys get to it. But I'm more accessible now when it's speaking to my colleagues and this even addressing other things is I'm managing my time in such a way I can still be highly productive, yet still have some distance. So I was grateful for that experience. I wish everyone had that opportunity. And I'll also say this, my company culture is great. It really is. I mean, my team is so supportive. But internally, when you think of being a caregiver and a provider for your family, it plays tricks on you. It's like, I can't give this up. We work so hard. I can't lose this. You love seeing your wife. I'll be honest, we had just bought another house right before. So you seeing your wife actually comfortable in the home that you bought and have the baby room, it definitely put things in perspective for me. So now going forward, like I said, I'm just bettering myself, opening up opportunities for me, and really just cultivating a more centric culture for me versus what the company is offering. But I will say this, the company I work for is great, great programming. I wish everyone takes advantage of it. And I think a lot of therapy for a lot of young men or men in general when it comes to value and how we can add value, and then getting outside of the economics of things and really focusing on what's important. But yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'm a pretty open book.
Thank you, Kenneth. We really appreciate that. And I think folks who have been there, we all know that guilt of wanting to be a good dad, which means being there for your wife and your kid, but also being the provider and sort of being that source of income. So I think one of the reasons you see a lot of states increase parental leave over time is the more folks that do that, the easier it gets. A lot of it's in our head. We go through it, we learn. Other folks go through it, they learn, but policy is going to be a big part of that.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.
So at that time, where we're going to open it up to general Q&A. So as we do that, we can think about a few key takeaways that this is more than a policy. It's part of that continuum of care we talked about before, during, and after. It supports families at one of the most critical points in their journey, right? Bundle of joy can be a bundle of stress. And it strengthens outcomes for children's parents, workplaces. There's a lot of benefits out of this. We recognize that continuum. We can shift the conversation, whether it's needed, to how to make it more accessible and effective. So as you're thinking about your questions and what all our good folks here said, think about your own organization's experience. Where do you see gaps in this continuum of care? And how could paternity leave help close those gaps? And also, while you're doing that, we do have a brief post survey. So think about what everyone talked about today, and please submit the survey. It's super helpful for NCIT to help learn what worked, what we can do better, what you really got out of it and want to see more of. And with that, I'll open it up to questions.
I just want to say I'm so impressed by all of the panelists, and I thank you for sharing your personal stories. That's always rough, but it really creates that human face and voice we need to this issue. So my question to any of the panelists, no one in particular, is how do we? What's the strategy? How do we take it from we're outraged that some men are being treated this way and it's impacting their partners and their families to actual action that can change policy so dads are protected as well?
Uh,
Oh,
uh,
oh, go
please.
ahead, Kenneth.
Oh, no, by all means, you go, Vicky.
No, you're amazing. Please speak.
Oh, I appreciate you. Thank you. And I really thank you for all the information you shared. I was telling my wife, who I think is on the call, that I really appreciated your data points because you hit the nail on the head for me. That's exactly how I felt. One thing I could say is culture of men and what that means in 2026. In full transparency, I don't think we communicate enough about some of the pressures that we feel. And one thing that I really do with my wife now is actually be more verbal and communicative with my emotions. I grew up in a very tough household. My father did several tours in Iraq. So my whole childhood, post 2001, he was deployed for most of it. And my mother was my scoutmaster. So you can imagine, she was 19 when she had me. Very disciplined household, very disciplined. I'm talking sheets, crisp. Everything was in line growing up. So emotion for me wasn't something that was ever discussed. It's duty, duty to everything. And so when you look at your wife and, a certain comfort level that she has, all you think about is duty. But it strips away the emotion of being present, of being vulnerable, of being accessible. And so a challenge for a lot of us, I feel, especially in a corporate level, we don't talk about it. I could tell you in countless boardrooms that I've been on, I was a VP at a smaller bank at 25 with grown men. And the conversation typically, well, Ken, as you progress, you're going to be divorced and you're going to have a younger wife. And I was like, no, that's not happening. And they talk about how, the more we pay you, the more we expect you to work. You're going to pay $200,000 a year. Guess what? You're not going to see your family. So let's pay you enough to where you can compensate to where perhaps your wife doesn't have to work. And, she can just do this and that. And that doesn't work. And that's not even the life I want. My wife is a beast, first and foremost. She's an attorney and she's awesome. And Lord willing, hey, if I lose my job, I'm good now. But for the longest part, we have this culture of I have to do this, I have to do this. It's like a bull in a china shop. So I don't think we've ever cultivated what it means to be accessible, to be a new age father, not so much of the fathers that we grew up with, that were just very hard nosed, nose to the grindstone, that type of mentality, but working hard and being emotionally stable. you know, is she okay? I'm learning about postpartum depression. What is that? Depression in my book is go to the gym. So for me is no, I need to be accessible. I need to listen. What's going on? The transformation of her body. How does she feel about that? And we need to cultivate a culture of men that says, no, this is what manhood is. In order to be a man and the idea of masculinity, you have to understand what femininity is. You have to have a feminine side. You have to understand what it means to cultivate not just a life of your own, but emotions that are needed for the love of your life to thrive. And I don't think we discuss that enough. And the first thing we do when we go back to work is, oh, Ken, how's the boy? Okay, good. Tell me about fourth quarter projections. And it's just like, and I think about the women who are on call. I have one colleague, and I'm four boys in the past like 5 years. I'm like, how do you do it? And came from the military, and it's just she gets right back to it. And I'm just like, wow, okay, the money's great, all that's good, but what am I missing? And I think that's something we need to discuss more.
I totally agree with all of that, as well as the comment of Ken for president. But related to that, one of the things that's been really interesting to watch is the Dads Caucus that's developed in Congress, where men are speaking out about being dads, are claiming kind of the policies that help them to be better dads and would help their constituents to be better dads. And I was just part of this Men and Boys event that Ecomundo put together in Brazil, where there's a whole working group thinking about how to cultivate this idea about elected officials who are men and candidates who are men claiming fatherhood and claiming care as kind of a core tenet of who they are as politicians, as well as a campaign called Vote Like a Dad, which is trying to infuse men as voters with care issues at the top of their minds. So I think that's another piece to this is really creating political identity around around care and fatherhood as well.
Well, I want to say thank you so much to all of our panelists. I want to say a huge thank you to everyone who turned out today. We want to be mindful of everyone's time. This conversation is so rich, and I hate to cut it off here, but we do need to be mindful of everyone's time. And so go ahead and wrap. Just a reminder, this is recorded. We'll put it online. We'll also send some follow-up materials. And at the very beginning, we asked you to put one word in the chat for your opinion of fathers, those positive father figures in your life, your dad, your uncle, a friend, maybe even your partner. Take a moment today, if you can, share that word with them and tell them what it means to have them in your life. And with that, we'll go ahead and wrap it. I hope everyone has a lovely and safe afternoon. Bye-bye.